Hello everyone. Welcome to my presentation. I'm Pankaj Bajracharya from the Department of Geography, Environment and Sustainability. I conducted this research as a part of my dissertation with my advisor, Dr. Salima Sultana. In this research, I examined some of the factors that would need to be considered for a successful adoption and implementation of Urban Growth Boundaries, or UGB, for the city of Chattogram in Bangladesh. So, what is an urban growth boundary? An urban growth boundary in simple terms can be defined as land regulations that have been put into place in most cases by the local government to prohibit urban growth and development beyond a defined boundary. They are designed to protect non-urban areas outside the delineated boundary by promoting compact and contiguous urban growth within the boundary. For the most part, these urban growth boundary policies have largely been implemented in the developed world. There are only 5 developing countries where these policies have been explicitly used for urban growth management. However, over the years, there's been an increasing interest within the developing countries for the implementation of urban growth boundaries, as seen by the increase in literature on the topic. As a part of my dissertation, I'd previously proposed the adoption of urban growth boundary for the city of Chattogram as my case study. My area of interest, the city of Chattogram, over the past several decades have experienced a rapid, unregulated, and haphazard expansion of urban areas. The goal of adoption of urban growth boundary for the city of Chattogram would be to restrict and control the rate and extent of urban expansion and direct where the urban expansion would occur. While urban growth boundaries have been successfully implemented in various places in the past, there have been numerous issues, particularly within the developing countries, that have resulted in less than effective implementation of urban growth boundaries. In this paper, I investigate some of the major concerns that would need to be addressed for this potential implementation of urban growth boundary for the city of Chattogram to be successful. In order to do so, I examined some of the recurring issues discussed in the past literature on the adoption and implementation of urban growth boundaries within the developing countries. Based on it, I cross-referenced the planning and policies for the city of Chattogram and additionally obtained inputs from the stakeholders through an online survey of planners, policymakers, and academics, along with an unstructured interview. Using this information, I compiled the 5 key considerations that would need to be addressed for the adoption of urban growth boundaries for the city of Chattogram to be successful. The key considerations are as follows. First, when looking at the urban policy and regulatory consideration, literature along with survey indicates that in order for the policy to be successful for Chattogram, there would need to be an efficient planning body that is able to provide good urban governance and is able to have an accountability and enforcement strategy in place. Additionally, the urban growth boundary would also need to be backed by other supporting policies that would work in conjunction to address specific concerns related to unregulated urban expansion, such as issues of informal settlements within the city. In the past implementation of urban growth boundaries within developing countries, a lot of them have not performed well, particularly due to disputes between policymakers and disagreements within different levels of the government. So, in addition to supporting policies for the successful implementation of urban growth boundaries for Chattogram, there is also a need for effective collaboration and coordination between different levels of the government, stakeholder policymakers, in order to avoid conflicting policy objectives at these different levels. One of the biggest concerns seen in the developing countries with regards to urban growth boundary implementation was the lack of institutional capacities within these countries. This resulted in inefficient delineation of urban growth boundaries and improper enforcement of these boundary regulations. For Chattogram, for the policies to be successful, it would require trained personnel, use of updated maps for boundary delineation, and effective enforcement of these policies. Here, the donor community would play a big role in building these institutional capacities through training, technical assistance, and financial support. Based on the literature review, another big challenge that was seen in the past implementation of urban growth boundary in developing countries was the pressure from external influences such as private and construction companies, political parties, as well as donor agencies to change the delineation of the urban growth boundary or to create favorable policies. These concerns regarding external influences on the policy for personal and financial benefits of the private companies and political parties could potentially have a detrimental impact on the overall effectiveness of the urban growth boundary for Chattogram. Finally, with Bangladesh having a top-down political structure there is a distinct lack of public participation and stakeholder input in the policymaking process. This lack of input at the grassroots level in the policymaking process could lead to mismatch between objectives of the policy and the needs at the grassroots level, thus leading to policy alienation. This is something that needs to be considered, and input from various stakeholders would need to be accounted for in the policymaking process for the adoption of urban growth boundary to be successful. In conclusion, these considerations listed in this study are some of the most prominent ones. There are additional topics related to establishment of urban growth boundary in Chattogram that must be further explored and should be analyzed in depth. This case study of urban growth boundary for the city of Chattogram will not only be beneficial for Bangladesh, but will also contribute to the growing literature on the application of urban growth boundary within the developing countries.